Shortbox Nation, hello again. Welcome back, and thanks for present play today. Or to borrow a phrase from today's special guest, hello, you lovelies. If you're brand new, welcome to the show. My name is Botter, and this is the Shortbox Podcast, the comic book talk show that brings you the best conversations about your favorite comics with the people that put their blood, sweat, and tears into making them and celebrating them. This is episode 474, and today I'm joined by Coy Jandreau. He's a self-proclaimed professional enthusiast and overzealous Bostonian who co-hosts a number of comic book-centered talk shows. He's the comic correspondent on DC Studios Showcase on HBO Max. He's a co-host of the Real Rejects podcast and the host of the companion podcast for DC High Volume Batman. Coy has also shared his knowledge, love, and expertise of all things comics and movies in a number of roles and appearances on popular outlets like Collider, Nerdist, and Hollywood Reporter. He's on the show today to talk about life as a professional comic fan. I mean, who wouldn't want that? That's what I'm aspiring to, a professional comic book guy, all right? We're also going to talk about the talk shows that he's on. We're going to hear more about his work on the DC High Volume Batman podcast, which brings essential DC comic stories to life off the page and into the audio space. The podcast has already adapted Batman Year One by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli. It's also done Batman Long Halloween by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. And they're currently underway with the audio adaptation of Batman Dark Victory. The podcast is great. As an audio sound production nerd, it's phenomenal. And I can't wait to talk more about it. Before we get started, I want to shout out the official sponsor of the Short Box. And that's Gotham City Limit Comic Shop, Jacksonville's premier shop for comics, toys, collectibles, and more. Check out this episode's show notes for a link to their online store where you can buy shop-exclusive comics and merch. And lastly, I want to dedicate this episode to all of the Short Box patronies, a.k.a. the loyal supporters that make up the Short Box Patreon community. If you want more Short Box episodes or free comics and Short Box merch sent directly to you, which obviously you do, become a patron of the show at patreon.com/theshortbox and get all of that and way more. Look, joining the Patreon and supporting the show costs you, I'll admit, it's $5 a month, which is the price of one single Marvel comic. Not really, because comics are kind of expensive nowadays. So it's a small amount for you, but a huge and a big deal and help for me. You know, running a weekly podcast for the last 13 years is not cheap. And your support, whether that be monetary or even a like or subscribe, are equally appreciated. Once again, support the show, get rewarded, and have my undying gratitude by signing up at patreon.com/theshortbox. And without further ado, Shortbox Nation, let's welcome Coy Jandreau to the show. What up, Coy? How you doing?
How's it going, man? Great intro. I felt the vibes. I felt the energy from here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I try to set the vibe, man, especially when I got an awesome, solid guest like yourself. Yeah, Coy, I've been excited about this. You know, as a fellow podcaster, comic book guy, I always feel like I gotta bring my A game. And my first immediate question for you is that on the DC Studios Showcase, you are billed as the comic book correspondent, which might be the greatest title I've ever heard in my life. I'm like, yo, what do I need to do to get that role? I guess I'm curious, what does that entail? And I mean, do you agree? Do you have the best job in the world?
You know, I think I do. I feel like it's that 10-year overnight success thing where I feel like I'm finally appreciating where I'm at. And so I will hold to that best job in the world moment. But it took so long to get to the point of even comfort, much less, you know, this is only the beginning kind of feeling. But I do feel like I can like breathe a little now. It's been white knuckling it for about a decade. And now I'm like, okay, we're in a good spot. Comic correspondent is such an honor. You know, I grew up watching The Daily Show. I love my Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert's, even John Oliver now with Last Week Tonight. And that correspondent title always felt like such a, I'm right here, I'm knocking on the door, this feels like it's big and important. And so I really like the idea of being a comic book correspondent because it's bridging the gap between our world and mainstream media, right? Like comic books still have that little asterisk next to them, and I want to get rid of that. I want genre content to be just as laureled up as a Meryl Streep joint. So the first step is being a comic book correspondent for HBO.
Yeah, look, you're doing the Lord's work, all right? You definitely are inspiring to folks like me that are in this space that are looking towards that. And I guess my next question along this same line is that I understand your Instagram bio. You've got, what does it say? It says 3 times a Hall of H professional enthusiast, so on and so on. And I've got this theory, and I guess you could correct me if I'm wrong. is Hall H for someone like us, right? Like podcasters, someone that's in this space that, loves getting in front of the camera and talking to crowds. Is Hall H the Mount Olympus? Is that the pinnacle for folks like us? What's after Hall H? Especially
There's
someone like you.
nothing like it, dude. There's like
Hmm.
truly, it is a one of one experience. I remember the first time I hosted it, it was for Keanu Reeves' comic. It was the
Yeah,
first
Berserker.
ever comic book on that stage. In
Whoa.
all the years of Comic Con, there had never been a
What?
comic on Hall H.
Huh.
That's
The more
It
you
was
know.
unacceptable. It was something I fought
Yeah.
for because since reading Wizard magazine in the 90s, I knew about Comic-Con, and then like one of my mentors and heroes, Kevin Smith, he always did his Hall H evening with Kevin Smith, which evolved into like his yearly panel. And to me, that was the bar. And so when I got to walk out on that stage as the first comic book host, presenting the first comic to be on that 6,500 person platform, it felt like being a rock star. It felt like, for a beautiful hour, I was like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones. Like I felt that sheer surge,
Yeah.
and it was wonderful, man. But I remember the first 30 seconds I walked out there, I very much knew I would either be broken by it or my life would change. Like that much energy coming at you, 13,000 eyeballs, right? Like 6,500 people times two. That is so much energy. And so I knew like I either needed to be lifted up by it and it would change my life, or it'd be like, oh God, it's guy, and cower away. And I remember I walked out and I put my arms out and I looked out at the
Take it
crowd, and
in.
watching
Yeah.
that footage back is so funny because I see the moment where I was like, this is it. It's great or awful. And
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
just kind of like got swept up. And then it was with Keanu, and Keanu has this amazing comic, and he really wanted this to be a comic book panel, and he really cares about the fan experience. So every conversation I had with him leading up to it or since has been such a, what do the fans want? What do they love? How do we tell this story in a way that engages? And then Ron Garney on art. Like Ron Garney is one
Yeah,
of my
dude.
favorite modern artists, period. So to find out Ron Garney knew my work, and to find out like, we had similar interests. Like he's a big martial arts guy. I'm a casual
Mhm.
martial arts guy. But I've stayed in touch with Ron since, and it's such an honor to be on a platform like Hall H and to have that energy from the crowd and to connect with heroes of yours in such a public way. It really can't be topped. I don't know if there's a next one of those. I think my next finish line to feel like I did a new thing is I want to do a talk show on network TV that's about our stuff. And
Damn
DC
right.
Studio Showcase is really close. Like it's about as close as exists so far, but I want to get comic books to the Daily Show level, and that's I think my next Hall H.
I respect that, man. In a similar note, I'm hearing you mention Ron Garney. A couple years back, I had a chance to interview Ron Garney and Matt Kent about
Yeah.
working on Berserk, and they had. I mean, it ended up turning. I think the last 20 minutes was nothing but like a Keanu Reeves like love fest. We were just hyping up Keanu Reeves because they just had so many great stories to share about working with him and just how passionate he is about comics and like how serious he was. Because like I think there's a little bit of a certain level of pessimism that comes from comic fans when they see like, oh, a new comic book by this A-list celebrity or this musician, and it's like, is this going to be a cash grab? Is it going to be any good? But I think Keanu Reeves and Berserker, I mean, to see it still going on, they're doing spin-offs and one-not shots and etc. I think he came about it with like the right intentions, and it produced a damn good, good comic book with some of the best creators, in comics.
And I'd argue he also knew the strengths of the medium. He came to the comic knowing what he wanted to make out of a comic. He wasn't trying to do what he does so well in movies. He wasn't trying to make something that would be better as a TV show. He knew comic books were the place to tell this story, and I think that's really important, and it shows his love for the medium in general.
Yeah. So I want to, I guess, on the staying on. I mean, the whole conversation is gonna be about comics. What am I talking about? I wanted to hear about your origin story because, as we know, all great comics, superheroes, etc., start off with a good origin story. I understand that you were born in Virginia but raised just right outside of Boston. You now live in LA, doing all the cool stuff there. First question: what's your earliest memory of comic books? Like, do you remember the comic book that made you a fan of the art form?
You know how you look at photos sometimes and it fills in memory? Like when you have a photo, it kind of contextualizes. I won't claim to remember this moment, but I've looked at the photo enough that I've got memories
Oh
of
wow.
memories of memories. My first comic ever was when I was 2. I don't remember being 2, but I got given a Spider-Man 2, Todd McFarlane's Torment issue 2 from
Hello.
1990 because it was on the shelves at the time, and my parents thought it was cute to give me like, issue 2 and it's out. So that
Yo,
1990 issue, I
shout
was
out
born
to
in
your parents.
88 and that was 1990. So they gave me an issue 2 for my second birthday, and I have a picture on my second
That's
birthday
great.
with it behind me, and it says 2 and I'm 2. And I learned to read with Spider-Man. So
Dude, that's
basically,
great.
comparing photos to words, right? Like that's how babies learn. My parents were smart enough to be like, well, this is a logical way to teach him. So I was saying words like ravaged, but I didn't know how to pronounce it because I'd only read it. So I said like ravaged
That's
until I
great.
was 5 because
Yeah,
who says
yeah,
ravaged as a baby? But in comics, that's a common word. But yeah,
yeah.
my parents were artists, and then are artists, and then
Oh,
my
wow.
dad is a huge comic fan. So I inherited his Batman and his X-Men when he was like a teenager. My parents had me as teens, so he was
Cool.
collecting as a teen, and then
Oh,
in
wow.
his 20s kept collecting, and then I got to get those books because I would steal them, and eventually he was like, fine.
Come on, man.
But the whole Claremont Byrne era, a lot of old Batman from like the Neil Adams era. So my pops really is a huge part of this.
Bro, your parents, especially your dad, raised you on good stock. It's like, yo, he comes from
Yeah.
good stock. You know when they say good stock? Man, I'm looking at the cover of First Spider-Man #2, and yo, big shout outs to your parents for just being like, you know what? We're gonna take a gamble on this comic because I know my parents would be like, are you insane? There's a scary lizard man on the front,
And it's Todd
and
McFarlane. It's terrifying, dude.
yeah, that's dope. You know what? Speaking about your folks, Coy, I've been following you on Instagram for a while now, and I got to say, I think one of the most endearing posts I've ever seen actually comes from you. I think was it earlier this year? Your parents came to visit you, and you took them like on one of the dopest like just field trips ever. You took them to like a comic shop, the studio, the DC Studios place, and I was like, yo. That's awesome, man. That you can continue to share your love of like your passion, your hobbies, your work with your parents, and they be excited and have some sort of connection to it. That's awesome.
Well, they, are the reason this is possible, and I never forget it. So as soon as we figured out the logistics of getting them out here, I brought them to the Superman premiere. So
Oh,
that was
wow.
their first ever premiere. I saved the first for, something big and impactful. I've been out in LA 16 years this November, so it had been 15 and a half at that point. And I've been to hundreds of premieres, but nothing felt like uniquely my parents and me. And nothing felt like the right first. So Superman rolled around, and I'm working with DC so closely now that I thought this would be a really personal experience. And then on top of that, my dad got me into comics, so I thought
Yeah,
introducing
why
him
not?
to Jim Lee and to Kevin McGuire and Dan Jurgens, like that's the place to do that. And my mom, her second favorite actor in the world, second only to Tom Cruise, is Nicholas Holt. So with Nick
Oh,
being
whoa.
Lex,
That's
I
cool.
got to
Yeah, yeah.
like really connect my family. So mom got to meet Nick, my dad got to meet like Frank Quietly and Jurgens and Jim. Jim's become like a friend, which is surreal. So like talking to Jim and introducing my dad obviously has known Jim's work for 30 years,
Hmm.
but Jim now knows my dad works for HP and does printing. So Jim had questions for my dad, and I got to see this like.
Oh, that's so cool.
So I talked to
Yeah.
these, icons of comics enough that it didn't feel like they didn't know my parents. So they were like so excited to meet them, and I got to meet
Hmm.
the son that made it. So it was really, really special. We walked the red
Hell
carpet.
yeah.
We got Getty images together. It was really surreal, man.
So you said that you moved to LA from Boston. I'm assuming I think your bio says something about like after college. What did you major in college?
So I wanted to be an actor. I mean, I was a SAG actor at 16. Like I did it. And that's always weird to look at as like a lot of people fighting for this incredible career and this beautiful art. I didn't feel like it was the one of one magic that I felt like I should have. You audition 100 times, you might get one role. It's such a get told no for a living profession that when I was on set, I was like, man, I don't love this as much as I feel like I should for the 6 months of fighting for it every time I book a gig. So I remember like repetition would drive my brain crazy. I'd be repeating a line and I'd be like, I just don't enjoy the
Hmm.
70th take. And I worked for my favorite director ever. I worked with Fincher, and Fincher's known for his multiple takes. And I remember thinking like, I feel like I took a job from someone who would murder someone for this, and I'm not
Hmm.
ecstatic. This is not quite it. Like it was close. And then I was working on R.I.P.D. with not a great movie, but a really good experience for me with Ryan Reynolds and Jeff Bridges. And this was after I'd moved to LA. I flew back to do R.I.P.D. to do some stunt work. And I was a stuntman too. I did a lot in the film space. And I remember talking to Ryan about Deadpool, and he had not, like, the footage hadn't come out, nothing had been revealed. They were trying to get it made, but it wasn't going through. And so Jeff Bridges came over and we were talking about Deadpool, and basically when I was so ecstatic about it, Ryan was like, dude, you should do this. You should talk about comics. And I was like, that's a thing. And within a year, that footage got leaked by whomever. And I was on Screen Junkies doing a video called Please Explain Deadpool. It hit 1 million views in like a week.
Damn.
And all of a sudden I was like, oh, this seems like a sustainable. And then I did it unpaid or low paid for about 5 years. And about 5 years ago, I started getting my own shows. And then in the last year, it's kind of like, now it seems real. But I was an actor, a stuntman, back to actor, wrote some, had a script optioned, then fell into hosting comic stuff.
Damn, landed where you needed to be.
Yeah, man.
You know, I was looking through your YouTube today, and selfishly, there was a video that I was like, I gotta watch this before I interview him. And it was you had a series, really quick, for those that are maybe not unfamiliar. You had a series that you were hosting, that was hosted on the Collider Ladies Night YouTube channel, which I thought was interesting. But it was called Comic Shopping, where you would go around with celebrities such as David Harbour. Who else have you had on there? I mean, a lot of them. You literally would go into a comic shop, you know, talk comics with them, buy comic books. But you did one with David Lindelof, you know, the co-creator of Lost.
Damon. Yeah, I love that dude.
Which, by the way, I don't know if I've expressed this on the show or not. Me and my wife I've never watched Lost. We have been doing a watch Lost through over the summer. We are on the last season. So when I saw that you had David Lindelof doing a comic shop episode, I watched it this morning, and I was like, yo, this dude is awesome. Coy is a great host. This whole concept is great. I wish, you know, hopefully one day you guys bring that back. But I had no idea that he was, such a huge, well, I guess I'm not that surprised that he's a huge comic fan. But I didn't know how much Watchmen influence Lost. Because now when he said it, I'm like, oh shit, yeah, the multiple timelines. You know, it's like all starting to make sense. And I love how you were recommending him comics. Some of the comics that you were recommending him were Paper Girls, Something is Killing the Children, Wicked and Divine, which made me go like, yo, Coy knows his shit. And I want to ask, how do you go about recommending comics to like new people? Because I've got a certain way and approach to it, but I'd like to hear yours first. Like, do you have like a go-to when it comes to recommending comics for new fans or folks that are interested in the medium?
So that was a show I did on Collider that we did an incredible whole season of. Jake Gyllenhaal, Seth Green, Zach Levi. And what I did on that show was I would pull based on their answers. So I didn't have preconceived notions of what I wanted to pull. I would listen to them, and based off what their instincts were for art, I would go, oh, I feel like you'd like this. Because I never want someone to discover comics the wrong way. The last thing you want is like, oh, this is beloved, but it didn't connect to me. I'm done with the medium. So I might have, like, if I recommended them 15 comics, I might have 2 or 3 in my back pocket that are very acclaimed and kind of universal. But then the other 10 or 12, I would pull on the spot. So with Damon, he is such a weekly Wednesday warrior. Like, that dude is at comic stores every Wednesday. And at that time, Something is Killing the Children is only on issue 2. And I was a huge, before it ever came out, Something is Killing the Children fan, which is ironically how Keanu ended up hearing about me, which is how that panel happened. Because it's Boom Studios who published Berserker. So Something is Killing the Children is now like getting a Netflix adaptation. It's now this huge spectacle, this giant successful indie. But at the time, no one had heard of it. So I was like, I think the way to get Damon and to show him I know ball is I'm going to show him this brand new indie comic from this studio Boom that isn't yet this giant titan.
Yeah,
so
sure.
That comic was like totally in the moment, because once I realized Damon wasn't like a showy Big Bang Theory nerd, he was an actual ride or die community nerd. Like, he was authentic. Then I was like, okay, let's go deep cuts. Let's find this dude some stuff. And he mentioned Loving Saga, so that pivoted into Paper Girls. So all of these are based off that. And like Jake Gyllenhaal, one of my favorite actors of all time, he kept talking about his influence between film to film, how one film influences the other. So I was like, okay, wait, let's go Straczynski. Let's get some Straczynski Spider-Man, because that is so influenced by the Silver Age, and that like influenced the future. So I paralleled how he sees acting to how I see writing. So I'm always like finding my connection to the actor and then making that work. And that's how I think the show did so well. I'd love to. What I want to do is bring that show back, but in my own way, and have it be for me. Like, I have friends that are actors, and I just want to go to this comic store with them, and I want to do a version of that. So there are some cookings of that maybe
Cool,
happening,
cool.
and I got plans because Collider was a giant video network. The reason it's
Yeah,
called Collider
big time.
Ladies Night now is they changed the video designation to just her Perry's Ladies Night. So all the videos that were Collider Video are now called Ladies Night, and I'm like,
Yeah,
well,
okay.
I'm
That
not a
makes
Ladies Night. But if anyone deserves to be running the entire video division, it's Perry. So I was like, I don't love that my videos are no longer in a category, but I love that
sure,
Perry is
sure.
like, taking a gift.
Really quick, were all those videos shot at Golden Apple, LA?
All of them but the Jake one. I flew to
Okay.
London with Jake, with the Spider-Man
Oh,
cast. So
that's super
that
dope.
one was at Orbital, which is no longer a store, unfortunately. But we were in the heart of London promoting Far From Home.
Where now with you being in LA, do you have where's your local comic shop? Where do you call home in terms of local comic shop?
I got two. Golden Apple is near and dear to my heart. They're on
Damn right.
Melrose. They are incredible. They have my most consistent, like, oh my god, this crazy grail. My weekly shop is in Burbank, House of Secrets, and they are, I think, one of the best at like consistently having your pull, knowing your type, knowing what to recommend to find stuff,
Hmm.
and it's just a store. It was the first store I found in LA, and I've got this weird loyalty thing. Like I shopped at the same Boston-based store for 16 years, and I wouldn't go to another store. So these are my two that I like won't betray. I will only
Nah.
go to these two stores in LA.
No, look, the fact that you have two shops, I'm like, a part of me wants to say, yo, he knows ball. Every good comic shop guy has got, a home, and then they've got like the shops where like, oh, I picked these titles up from here, and then this shop is for like my indies. So now you know ball indeed. I think another fun fact about your Coy, and another aspect of your Instagram that I like following so much is that you'll do these weekly posts where you're like, hey, here are my favorite comics of the week. And I think there are like 10 of them. You'll highlight 10 comics. But what I ended up learning and doing this research is that you're reading like, correct me if I'm wrong, like 50 to 70 comics like a week. Is that accurate?
Every major one from every
Holy
major
shit!
publisher, man. Because I want to be fair, right? Like if I'm working at and with DC, but I'm not a DC comic
Sure,
exclusive
exclusive.
reader, and so I want to be a comic book correspondent. And if I don't,
Hmm.
read everything from Image, from Marvel,
Sure.
from Boom, from IDW, then I'm favoring the ones I am reading. So the only way I feel like I can be democratic is to know it all. Now, that said, I do drop a book after 4 or 5 issues if it's not for
That's
me,
fair.
because about 90 books come out. And I doing 70 is already hard. I'm reading 10 comics a day every
Shush.
day, which means if I go on vacation, I either need to read while I'm away, or within 1 week of missing my books, I'm at 140 comics. So as it is, I'm drowning because the comics are, sequential. I can't just skip a
Sure.
month.
Yep.
So I can't add more. So I give a book 4 or 5 issues. If it's not for me, I don't like shit talk it. I just know that it's not my thing. But
Sure.
I
Sure.
like to put out those 9 or 10 comics that basically say like, hey, these are the approachable books. These are the books I think are the best right now. This is most of the major publishers. And I want people to find their way in so that it doesn't feel as intimidating.
No, I look, when they talk about the difference between a professional and a hobbyist, I think that's the kind of work ethic that you're talking about, where it's like consistent and also like kind of, what I'm saying, like 50 to 70 comics a week that is an undertaking, and I salute you for that. I want to talk about, I want to get your thoughts on some of the titles for your favorite comics from September 17th. Really quick, we are recording on September 25th, so that means Coy's probably got another post coming here soon. But Coy, what comes to mind when I say some of these names from your most recent favorite comics post? Batman and Robin Year One.
Dude, Chris Samney doing art and Mark Waid writing is a dynamic duo in themselves. I love what Chris Samney does with Robert Kirkman, and I think it is only bested by this work with Waid. Waid is such a storyteller that is able
Yes.
to encapsulate a classic feel but not make it feel trite. He makes books feel like they've been around forever, and I would argue that Batman and Robin Year One will go down alongside Hush, and I would even argue, and this is a hot take, I would say it's going to go down with your Long Halloweens as one of the greats. I think it is a top 15 Batman run of all time, and I think it's only because it's brand new that it's not getting, like, it feels
Sure.
too soon to say something that strong, but
Yeah,
it is that good. You love Dick Grayson, you love the relationship. It feels paternal in a way that doesn't undermine Damian. It shows the difference between Dick and Tim, or Dick and
Mhm.
Jason, or Dick and Damian, and it does it while recontextualizing the mob, while making Gotham so interesting, while making Clayface even more intimidating. Like, firing in all cylinders, this book. It's immaculate.
I think I can get behind that. Samney brings such a unique and amazing visual identity to it that it stands out from any other, I think, Batman book on the shelf. And then, like everything you were saying about Mark Waid, spot on. I was recording another podcast earlier this week. We got on the topic of Mark Waid, and to me, he is the bastion of like superheroes and and superhero continuity specifically. Like so many other writers and comic creators talk so highly about how much Mark Waid reveres continuity and superheroes and uplifting those stories. So when you think about like, Mark Waid and Chris Samney on a book together, Batman at that, it's like, come on, man. It sells itself. So okay. So that was really well said. What comes to mind when I say Ultimate Black Panther?
So Ultimate Black Panther is one of my favorite, oh no, this wasn't for me in the beginning, but it found a footing that I'm so glad I read so many books, because if I only read 1 or 2 issues and then dropped a book, then I would have lost Black Panther. Black Panther started out in a way that it felt like it was really trying to find a way to modernize T'Challa, but the whole point of T'Challa to me is that he is out of time. Like, there is no... T'Challa works in the 1800s. He works in the 2000s. He is both James Bond and Batman and Black Panther. Like, he's this archetypal figure. And I kept finding Ultimate Black Panther in the beginning, just like not finding a tone, not finding a pace. And then all of a sudden on the second arc, issue 5 was solid, ending the first arc. But then issue 6 on, it has found this rhythm. It has found this way to play with the mythos. It's made Killmonger fascinating. It's made Storm her own entity without just making her like the bride of T'Challa. One of the most common things since they got married is everyone's like, well, that's how you bring in Storm. Like, just make her the wife of. And I was like, no, this is Storm. This is the goddess of the Marvel Universe.
Put some respect on Aurora's name, damn it.
She's not a wife. She is, if anything, T'Challa is her husband and equal.
Yeah.
Like, I would rather Storm be introduced and then we meet her husband, the new T'Challa.
Sure.
They're both the number 1 spot of their respective corners of Marvel. So I hate to hear when people think of her as one thing, and this comic managed to bring her in a way that didn't feel like it was undermining Storm, and it elevates T'Challa, and it makes Killmonger new and interesting, and it feels very modern in a way that doesn't feel like it's sacrificing the heart of T'Challa.
You know what? I think I'm gonna give that. I think for me, it suffered the same thing as you were saying in the beginning. Like, it was a little shaky. You're kind of wondering what direction. But hearing what you just said about the second arc, I think I'm gonna go back and check that out based on your recommendation. Question for you, real quick. I meant to ask this earlier, but what is your preferred way of reading? You mentioned the comic shops that you go to. Are you a physical only? Do you mingle in with digital? I mean,
I mingle in digital, but I would say I'm 80% hard copy when I can. This is today.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. For our video, look, I know for our audio viewers you can't see it, but my man Coy is holding a fat stack of comics.
So this just came in, and when this doesn't come in, I have to read digital because I'll get those files first sometimes. But overall, I like to hold the comic. I like to feel the weight of it. I like to turn a page. I like to navigate it myself. Now, rereading, I like digital. I love the cinematic
the views
slide through, because
panel to panel.
when I'm speed reading, what a gift. So a reread, I'm that guy. But I also
100%.
When I want to go back to some old school, I just got this in, and sorry for audio listeners, but this is how I'm going to be re-experiencing this beauty right here.
Oh, all right. For audio only, he's holding up the Green Lantern Green Arrow Omnibus. I think this is what collects all of the infamous Neil Adams.
Yeah, man. Look at the amount of books in this beast. Sorry again, audio listeners, but it's got a lot. So everything's kind of piecemeal. And my favorite Batman of the modern times is the Tom King stuff, and I finally got this beauty in, which is solid. the Mega
Tom
Omnibus. So when I'm reading something for the first time, I like individual issues because I kind of like the kinetic energy of switching from an Ultimate Spider-Man to a saga over to a Absolute Batman and then back to something like Wonder Woman. I like the feeling of different worlds because it feels like life. When I have a conversation with you, you know comic books, so you and I are going to talk in a different way. When I talk to my mom, she knows comic books from a certain time, but also
Hmm.
listens to me rant, so I'm going to have different keywords I hit. When I talk to my dad, we're going to go deep cut. When I talk to people at DC, they're going to know stuff I don't. We're going to talk differently. So I feel like that's comics is I like different flavors, different energies, just because life is so different moment to moment. When I walk out of my house, I don't know who I'm going to talk to first. I like that energy in my book, so I like the weekly release model the most.
Well said. Comic books is a language for sure. All right, I got one more title I want to hear your thoughts on. And considering I gave you a DC title and then a Marvel one, um, how about we combine them two for an amalgam? One might say. Thoughts on the latest Deadpool and Batman crossover, which I've been dying to talk to someone about now that I've read it. Thoughts on it?
I think it is the future. I don't think it's going to happen often. I don't think it should because then it won't be as special. But I think it shows this stupid beef that fans and not the actual companies themselves have made this Marvel versus DC. I say it all the time. I don't go to the Marvel store. I don't go to the DC store. I go to the comic store. And this book is a beautiful amalgam of what comics can be. This book didn't feel like it was more Deadpool than Batman in that
Sure, yeah.
huge, incredible story. It felt like what if Deadpool ended up in Gotham, and I got to feel the energy of Deadpool and Bruce Wayne feel authentic. All of those crossovers, like Chip Zdarsky wrote that great Wonder Woman Captain
Amazing.
America.
Love it.
That dude just finished a Batman run, and he's known for his Daredevil, Spider-Man, and Howard the Duck. Like, that is the beauty of these stories is these writers work at both houses. Like I want Bendis to get to explore coming back to Marvel after being at DC for a long time. That's a rumor. I don't know if it's happening, but books like this show, like, what if you love Deadpool and you think you love Batman because you've seen the movies and you now have this book to go, oh, I love Batman. And now you're going to go back to the comic store and you're going to venture out of your shelf that you've been looking at the whole time. You're going to find more shelves. When I read a Chip Zdarsky comic, I know I'm going to love his indie stuff even more. Like when I look at what he's doing with his family stuff, there's that incredible book, Public Domain, and it feels very
Yeah.
contained and real. I know I found that because I found his Spider-Man 10 years ago. I wouldn't have necessarily picked up Public Domain sight unseen. Brian K. Vaughan, like, I love Saga. Now I'll pick up anything literally he ever does, but I needed that weird space opera to get me there. So this book to me is, hey, you love Cap? Maybe you'll love Wonder Woman. Check out this story from a guy you might follow. Check out Kevin Smith writing Daredevil
Dude,
and Green
come on.
Arrow. Like it's a jam band. It's an ultimate mashup. It's going to introduce people to art. It's pulling down these stupid barriers, and I think it is high art, and it's so masterfully done. I love this handshake between the publishers. As someone who's worked with Marvel extensively and who currently works at DC, I want more of this, so my job's less hard because it's bullshit that people think there's this line.
Yo, preach, man. I feel that 100%. I thought this was a great, the whole time I was reading this and then hearing your words too, which reinforces it. The whole time I'm reading this, I can't help but think about the infamous music video with Run DMC and Aerosmith, where it begins where
Yeah,
each one of them
dude.
is in their room, they're rocking out, they're rapping, and eventually they break down the wall and they, end up performing Walk This Way. That's how I feel about this particular issue. It's such a good opening shot into setting up the next one, Batman and Deadpool, and it's like, hey, I want more of this, and I think you're right. I think it needs to be handled with care. I don't want too much of it, but I think what I would want is maybe a more longer, beefier story, maybe something a little more akin to like the JLA Avengers story from 2014. But as far as like just kind of like showing you like, hey, these characters work together, these short little vignettes. I mean, like you said, that Captain America Wonder Woman story was fucking incredible. I mean, Kevin Smith back on Daredevil, with Green Arrow, Adam Kubert. I mean, it's like, yo, come on. Even our boy Frank Miller is like, hey, like
I got 2 pages. I'm a jam out. Yeah.
yeah, right. It's like, okay, this was this was obviously like fan service, but they brought some great stories to it for sure. And I'm looking forward to like seeing them do more of it.
So you want like a 6-issue mini? You want like a nice like trade, like to grow into a narrative?
Exactly. Something that's a little more beefier story-wise that they could tell a little more and then still find ways to bring in more characters. But I like this vignette feel. This is like a comic you could hand to someone new that is
Anybody.
Exactly. And it's like, hey, just have some fun. This is like what comics and superhero comics and specifically are for. They're for fun.
I also think, and this is from like a comic book correspondent place, it's cool to have something that feels so landmark. This feels so important.
Yeah.
Because when you look at next year's the 50th anniversary of Superman and Spider-Man, that incredible issue is 50 years old next year.
Oh, yeah. One of my favorite comics I own. Yeah.
I think about that and I think, okay, what
Wow,
was
that's a
it
good
in
point.
76? Who were the big guys, right? In
Hmm.
76, you had Christopher Reeve making Superman as big as he is, and you had Spider-Man all-timer, right? Like he's Spider-Man. And then in the 90s, it was Spider-Man Batman. Now look at 2025, it's Spider-Man isn't in play, it's Deadpool Batman. So like
Hmm.
I love looking at it from like an
That's cool.
archaeological place. 30 years after the 90s, which is haunting, Deadpool is now in this place where he's with
Yeah.
Batman and he's the popular one. So I just love that from that perspective too.
Yeah, well said, well said. Really quick, do you have a because you mentioned prioritizing reading comics even on vacation, like on a good day when you're trying to crank out 10, 50 comics, whatever. Do you have a I guess a routine or yeah, I guess a routine or tradition? Like, do you prefer to read comics at home and on a desk, at a coffee shop? I guess how do you ensure that you are putting in time to like prioritize reading?
It's a great question because it changes, but so I have a 17 comic day today. I've got to read 17 books. Tomorrow is my post for the 24th. So the books that came out
Word.
yesterday
Okay.
as of recording I want to post those before the weekend because the whole point for me is I'm not getting paid for these posts. I'm not getting anything from these posts except for the knowledge that people might go to the comic store. If I wait too long, then they're not going to go backtrack most likely. If I'm trying to bring in new readers, so most people go on the weekends. So my goal is read every book, 50 to 70 books in 2 days, which is so hard because I'm trying to read it Wednesday, Thursday. And then, so the 10
Yeah.
books a day thing is I read as many as I can Wednesday, as many as I can Thursday, and then Friday morning finish off. That's my 30 to 40, depending on the day. And then the other 10 on my Saturday, Sunday, those are my rereads. So when Supergirl comes out, one of those weeks is going to be me rereading that whole trade. But I'm trying to cram in about 30 to 40 books in 3 days in actuality, and I'm rationalizing it by saying 10 a day. But I break it up into chunks. So I have 17 today. I read 3 this morning over coffee, and that's a beautiful like 40 minutes of I'm thawing. These are going to be my like start the day comics. I'm going to drink coffee and have this time. And then I like to get out of the house so it doesn't feel like I'm always trapped reading. So I'll read another batch out somewhere. So I took off social media from my phone as much as I could. And I now
Smart.
only, I have those spots where the muscle memory are my comic apps. So when I go to reach for something blindly, it's going to be a comic book app so I can read instead of doing something stupid on social media. And then when I come home, I like to tuck in, have the paper books, nestle up at the couch, have another cup of coffee. I'm a 4 or 5 cup a day guy. That's how I read so many. And then by the end of the night, I look at how many I have left, and that's my binge. At the end of the night, I'm like,
Word.
okay, this is my feature length. I'm gonna read 10. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's a journey, man. But I like to mix up location that way I don't feel like I'm buried. I love reading outside. I love physical because I can go to the park. I like laying in
Hmm.
grass. LA is great because there's so many parks and I can literally just F off and like find a patch of grass to read in. So yeah, getting outdoors first and then binging at home when I'm done at night.
So in short, caffeine and a
Caffeine
hell
is the
lot of it.
answer.
Okay, uh, Coy, I was gonna ask about because also on last week's list was Crypto, the Last Dog of Krypton, but
Dude.
I mainly had it on this list because I was gonna pivot that into asking about James Gunn, which means I'm just gonna ask you just point blank period about James Gunn because you guys had him on the DC Studios showcase, which I thought was a huge get. I mean, the video's well over 180,000 views. Long form interview at that. Like he's sitting down for an hour plus talking about. I think this was around the time of the Superman movie. But I guess I just want to know because I feel like I have been glazing, as the kids would say, James Gunn all year. Not only because Superman was amazing and Peacemaker is awesome, but I've been championing how much of a comic fan he at least online seems, and I want to get confirmation from you. Is he as big one? Is he as cool in person as I think he is? And secondly, like, is he truly a comic fanboy? Like I think, like he portrays himself online.
Yes, and the dude is very open to nerding out in a way that I don't see
Cool.
many people that are over the age of 17. Like this
Hmm.
thing happens when you stop going to high school and you just think that you're an adult now and you gotta put your big boy pants on and you lose that joy. You lose that joy de vivre. You lose that childlike wonder. James has it, man. And it's really cool to experience because I get self-conscious talking to almost anyone except comic writers or artists about comic books at my full like capacity.
That
I get yeah, there's no version of me that's going to talk to even a comic store owner with the passion I have, because then it's like, okay, easy, buy the book and go. Like there's a there's a bit of a
Yeah.
mania
Hey,
when you have
nerd.
as much
Even they're
coffee as
like,
I
hey,
do.
nerd, chill.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, get out of my store. But I mean, I'm a very passionate person about this medium because I feel like, one, it is denigrated often, and two, when people hear comic book movie, they're focused on the movie. And so I come from a place of like, well, these books, and I always try to like temper it a little. James is the opposite. James wants to geek out. James wants to hear all the nerdiest things you have to say. I see moments of like gaining respect and glee when I do the deepest cut at the highest level of excitement. I'm not afraid to geek out around James, and that is such a gift because that is such a rare thing. So he is such a nerd. At the Superman trailer event, I hadn't met David or Rachel or a number of the people that were there. I'd met James in passing over the years, but we didn't know each other. So at this event, it was the first time talking to him since I started at DC. And I was like, okay, this is crazy. I just started in like November. This is a trailer event, late November, early December. This is all brand new. And this is the biggest launch trailer since like No Way Home. And No Way Home, I actually hosted. It was me and Tom Holland hosting the No Way Home trailer for the world. Like I got to launch that trailer on YouTube, like to the world with Tom.
Oh,
So
badass.
this was the first time I was like, this is the guy that made it. I'm inside the house. I
Mhm.
need to leave a good impression, but also he seems cool and like a nerd. So I wanted to show like you hired the right guy, but also like I want to hear from him what he's excited about. And I remember referencing Superman for All Seasons, All Star Superman, Superman Up in the Sky, and the current run of Superman at the time where Silver Banshee had just gotten together with Jimmy Olsen. All in like a minute. I was like, "Da-da-da-da." And like not only was he receptive, but he was like, all that and the John Byrne run. Like you gotta, and like he immediately
I
was able to,
see. He's like,
yeah,
I see your Jeff Loeb Tim Sale, my friend,
and
and
I'm in.
raise you. Yeah.
So yeah, dude is as nerdy as you think. He's as in. Whenever I've talked to him, like we geek out over music, we geek out over comics, we geek out over movies, but he's always down. Like he doesn't ever want to like, oh, gotta go to the next meeting. Like he never feels like a CEO that's like, oh, I just did this for the cameras. It's not the dude. So it's funny. I like dude enough now that when I see crap about him online, I'm like, you don't even know. Like I get like it's I get
Yeah.
defensive.
I
Like, no,
got
he's
you,
a good
James.
one.
Don't worry.
He's a
Yeah.
good one.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a
That's
big
fun.
fan. And Peter Safran doesn't get enough love because he's not
Hmm.
on camera. Like he's the
Sure. Yeah.
producer that's kind of behind closed doors. But their relationship is so cool because it allows James to be so creative and Peter to be like the business guy. But Peter's such a business guy, but he's also such a nerd. So like you'll see the moment where he's like, and the suit jacket comes off. I can talk about geek stuff. And it's really cool because I don't think he necessarily wants to be as public facing as James does, but it's cool to be working with them and see that he isn't just a suit. He's a guy that has all of this affection for the characters that happens to be one of the best creative producers out there. So I think their duo is so special because James gets to be the crazy guy on stage like me, and Peter gets to be like, I'm gonna be crazy when I can, but also
Yeah.
like I'll
Yeah.
present myself. Like I'm also a good producer. So I love that duo, and James was even cooler than I expected, to be honest.
Two sides of the same coin. Yeah. Man, longtime listeners of the show will know that in the early years of the short box, they called me Marvel Botter. Marvel, 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 Marvel. I was it, man. Obviously, ended up growing up, learning to love all comics, and I find it just interesting how, at any given point throughout the years, especially in like the major big two, major direct market publishers, it's like it's ebbs and flows. Some years Marvel is on top; they're firing on all cylinders. Other years, like we're in right now, I think I can confidently say DC is on it, man. From the comics, from the Absolute line, they're all in initiative. I mean, just some great comics being produced. They've got a cabal of some talented ass writers and artists. And then you look at obviously the movies, James Gunn, the energy that he brings, Superman, Peacemaker. But also, man, I got to give credit to what I feel is like the third pillar, and that's DC's digital output. From things like DC Studios Showcase, their YouTube shows, DC High Volume, their podcasts and the audio adaptations. I think, synergy gets a bad word, but I truly think that in this case, it's a good word. There's a lot of great synergy going on about, and DC feels like they just know how to be forward facing. And I guess I'm curious to hear, from you. Obviously, you work for the company. Say what you will, but I mean, does it feel like DC, in the state of DC, is just in a really good, like one of its best places?
I'm gonna go from glazing my boss to glazing the company itself. But I think that
Hey.
they are, in my personal experience as a fan. I'll speak to this as a fan that happens to be able to look through the door, right? Like I'll speak to this as someone who's been outside going, "Let me in," to now
Mhm.
in. I have never seen a company that is so fan forward and tech forward. I've seen
Yes, yes,
companies that
that's the
are
part. That part.
that, and that's so hard to balance, right? Like I've worked uh, I've worked at places that really thought they knew better, and then it was like, but we are telling you no. And then I've worked at places that are like, we've got this idea, but we don't know how to actualize it. DC feels like it's listening to the fans, it's got the right creatives in charge, and they know how to actually actualize it. You mentioned Peacemaker and Superman, but also Creature Commandos this year.
Boom. Yes.
James wrote those three in a year. He did 650 pages of writing in a year. Most writers are lucky to finish a movie a year, if not like a 2 year window. This dude cranked out a full show, another full show, and a movie, and it didn't sacrifice the experience of the directing itself, of building this universe out. So that is trust from the DC side. If I was DC and we just hired a CEO and he was like, "Yo, I'm gonna do these two shows and movie real quick," no, too much. But then you look at what actually happens. That's because they trust in James. They trust in the creative vision. They trust in these characters. And they've also got an incredible team working with James. Like the DC Studios team started really small. It's still not huge, but every single person I've worked with there is the top of their game. I love going to work. I love filming with my DC Studios team. OBB is our production team, and those are some of the best in the game. They work with so many incredible musicians. There's like platinum plaques all over the walls. Like there's people coming in and out that are like, "Oh my God, there's like 18 security guards." But the whole time they're like laser focused on, it's a DC Studio Showcase day. You know what? Sabrina Carpenter can wait. And that's really special. Like that
All right.
doesn't happen, you know?
Yeah.
Like the nerds don't get to go like, "It's Monday, nerd day." And they take care of us. And then DC, there's the studio side and the comic side. There's so much synergy, to use that term that does to get a bad rap. Like Jim Lee and James Gunn actually have conversations, but it's not Jim Lee going, "What character do we need to make popular in time?" Or James Gunn going, "Hey, write this mutant as an Inhuman." Sorry, Marvel, that was a bad decision.
Ooh, wow.
But it
Shots
is.
fired.
I just love Kamala Khan too much to let that fly. But I think they've, to be fair to Kamala Khan, I think Aman Milani wrote the best comic allowing that to actually work. It's just a grace of Marvel. They hired the best actor to somehow make that transition happen. Like, it is a gift we got as good of a Miss Marvel. But DC has the best people in the best positions. They all trust each other, and they're all actually wanting to know what the fans want. And, you said you were seen as a Marvel bot for a long time. I was afraid to talk about DC. I've got receipts for days of me as a 5-year-old in a Batman shirt, me reading a Superman comic, all these things, but I didn't feel like I could scream it from the rooftops because the fandom was so disjointed. It was so fighting itself. It was so full of animosity. I didn't want to use my energy fighting these battles. But now that I feel like there's this beautiful overarching vision, there's a great team on the comic side. Like what the comics are coming out with right now is insane. That Tom Taylor Nightwing run, the Green Arrow run that unfortunately just got canceled, I think is the best Green Arrow in 20 years. And all of these books are because they trust in the quality, and we need the fans to go, "Okay, get louder, come back." Like, you showed up at the box office. The movie made hand over fist. It profited, one of the only superhero films to profit this year, if not the only. Now it's time to like go to the comics, and that's what I want to do, is get people in the stores so the whole thing can lift up. But yeah, I think DC is at a really incredible spot, and I really hope that I just hope they got to like do a victory lap. Like selfishly, since I know all these people, I hope a couple of them got to go like, "Okay, we did it. Year one. Okay, breathe." And because it's a dead sprint next year. Next year's Supergirl and Clayface and more TV. Like, it's crazy what we're getting. So I hope that they got to go like, "Look what we did. Now next."
Well, man, I mean, I agree. I'm here for everything you're saying, yeah, and you're right. It makes looking at the infighting is just like, yo, none of this makes any sense. Some years, like I said, this company's on top, this company's on top. But at the end of the day, I think what you said about, hey, I don't go to the Marvel store, DC store, I go to the comic store. As comic book fans, yo, we're doing good. Like, this is good for the industry. Like How often are we talking about, is comics dying? Are they, they're going, like they're old, they're dying, manga's eating our lunch, and it's like we have something to celebrate and rally behind. Like, let's put our differences aside. All right, we're all comic fans. That's the one flag we should all be waving together.
It is, as of filming, September of 2025, and we've had 8 Marvel properties, most of which were exceptional. I don't care about the reception, I care about my experience. I had a great
Sure,
time
yeah.
with most of them. And we had 3 sensational DC projects this year. And that's just the warm up for one of those companies. And the other company is doing this great, like, okay, we fell, time to get back up. And I think that there's never been a better time. People talk about the golden age of comics as like '08 because we had Nolan and Iron Man and all those things.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
agree, it was a golden age. Let's enjoy this silver age. Like, we're in a new era. Let's
I like
vibe
that.
with it. And if you look at the silver age of comics, it changed the physical formatting a little bit. It changed the
Hmm.
number of pages. It changed the tone of the books. Look what we're doing with comic book movies. We're changing the tone. We're changing the flavor. We're trusting in our audience. We're letting Superman be in his comic accurate outfit. We're letting things be comic-y like Fantastic Four. We're playing around with genre like Marvel Zombies. This is
Hmm.
the silver age of comic book movies. It's only going to fall apart if we keep letting the narrative be that it's falling apart. Things only fail when enough people yelling they're failing and stop showing up. I don't post bad reviews because I don't want to be part of the problem of like, oh, it's over. If I don't like something, I keep it to my damn self unless it's one of the top 10 biggest movies of the year and I feel inauthentic to my fans to not comment on it. But if it's like a mid-level thing, who am I that can't make a movie to shit on a movie? The problem is these giant movies people want to hate on, and then the people that would have shown up Thursday, Friday, Saturday are like, oh, I heard it was bad, I'll catch it on streaming. Movies can't sustain themselves on your $7 streaming service that 5 of you share, guys. It's not going to get made. So, like,
Jeez, Coy, geez, you could just call me out by name. I'm right here.
it scares me that people are like, I'll wait till streaming. I'm like, yeah, Disney
That's
went
fair.
up again, even though they lost $4 billion. And that scares me that Disney feels like they're in a position they need to raise the price because that's going to scare people off. And then if people are waiting on streaming, they're not going to see it at all. And Marvel Zombies, for example, that came out today, slaps. That is such a good movie show. I hate that they released it as a chunk. It's weird. But it's so exceptional, and I feel like because of the way people talk about these properties, people aren't even giving it a chance when it's streaming, much less paying for it in theaters. So I think
sure.
we need to turn the narrative around or we're all doomed and we lose all this stuff.
I think I might have found my soundbite intro. That was fantastic, and I think to add to it, it's something I always preach here. You got to vote with your wallets. You got to
100%.
vote with your wallets. And also, really quick, you reminded me, talking about, hey, if I don't like something, I just don't put it out there. It always reminds me of one of my favorite lines from Common, the rapper, on the song "The Sixth Sense." He says, "If I don't like it, I don't like it. That don't mean that I'm hating." You know?
Excellent common reference. We'll
Yeah.
sneak in a Jules Santana. We will. We'll do it.
Also,
Dipset.
real quick, on the topic of DC Studio Showcase, can I also give a shout out to your co-host, Frankie Smith and Tyler Coates, who are all phenomenal. I think you three together have such a phenomenal chemistry together. I love how Frankie will kick off every episode with like a really fun icebreaker question. Tyler is, I just love, like, I'll kind of like, no pun intended, like kind of like reserved and coy he is. And then, you bring like just that fandom and that energy. I think you guys work off each other so well. And it's a refreshing show. I mean, when you guys do your interviews, it's like equal parts informative. It's, what do they call it? Infotainment. It's like informational and entertaining. So glad to hear that you have such a great experience. And the guest that you guys have had on is like killer.
We just got nominated, man, for a Signal
Whoa.
Award. Do you know the
Let me go
Webbies?
to- Yeah, of course. Come on.
The
Yeah.
podcast equivalent of the Webbies, the same team. That team nominated us for best host team. So we're up, us, me, Frankie, Tyler. So if you guys are watching
give you
this,
one of
head
these.
on over to Signal.
For sure, man. No, you
Thank you,
deserve
thank
that.
you.
Yo, big shout out to the
So
team.
check out Signal. You guys can vote. It's just plug your email in and vote. And we're up against like Shay and some big names, but I want it. So go vote for us over at Signal. And I'm just honored to. I know they all say it when people get nominated, but I am so honored to be nominated. It is really special for a comic book based property to get that kind of love. So thank you.
For sure. All right. You know what, Coy, I want to go ahead and dive into I mean, this whole thing has been like a lot of fun, but I would feel remiss, and I would be doing Olivia a disservice, who set up this interview. Big shout out to Olivia. If I didn't get to finally talk about DC High Volume Batman, what's really cool, real quick, if you're watching the video, you've already probably noticed this, but audio listeners, me and Coy are both wearing what I'm assuming is our favorite Batman shirts right now. My man has got a Batman the Animated. Oh, that shirt is fire. Batman Animated Series, and I've got me a little Dark Knight
Oh, that
action
is
on my
dope,
shirt.
dude.
Yeah.
I like
So
that we have almost the same font too. Like, right?
yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. Dude, DC High Volume Batman. This podcast launched, and you can fill in the gaps if I get anything wrong. Wait a minute, is that the official comic adaptation?
They released this only for San Diego Comic-Con,
Whoa! I
and
need
it's
one of
got the QR code
those.
to scan, and
Oh,
it's
that's
a
fire.
different cover, and it's the Tim Sale art inside. And
Oh,
they
that's
didn't
dope.
tell me this was coming, but I got surprised with this at Comic-Con.
Oh yeah, I've seen that ad in I think another comic. Yeah, that's dope.
Blew my
Dang, that's
mind,
fire.
dude.
That's cool. Yeah. So, all right, DC High Volume Batman. For those that might not be familiar, it is a podcast that I believe launched this year. It is a audio adaptation. They started with Batman Year One. And Coy, the difference here is people hear audio adaptations. They might maybe thinking about some of the audio podcasts or audio books, but this one is like a DC High Volume is a super faithful adaptation. Can you fill in the gaps? What makes DC High Volume so special compared to like other comic podcasts and comic book audio dramas?
It is word for word. And I've said this and people have clapped back a little. I said the first of its kind. And I think people think I'm like, they've never adapted Batman to audio. It's not. It is the first word for word adaptation. So I love Long Halloween. I love the Long Halloween animated movie. I love that people that don't read comics now can hear it precisely as written. So when they're making the soundscapes, they're looking at panels. When they're having the actors in the booth, they're reading the comic emoting. So they do scripting and stuff, obviously, for, if someone walks into frame or an action has to happen where there's like a slight change of dialogue so you understand that like there's a gun in his hand versus like you see the gun. Like those elements are very creatively written. So there are writers on the show, but it is adapting Jeff Loeb. It is adapting the art style, but for your ears of Tim Sale. It's crazy. There are moments in Year One where I hear what I imagine Musichelli's style would sound like in a radio play. So like, for example, Year One is one of my favorite Batman stories ever, and I think it is one of the best Jim Gordon stories ever. I would argue that Jim Gordon...
Damn right.
We've adapted like Commissioner Gordon a ton, and he's still slept on. Like, Commissioner Gordon is such a good character that there is no moment where I feel like he gets his flowers. Like, more Jim Gordon love. There's a moment in Year One where, slight spoilers for a comic from 30 years ago, there's a moment where his baby is stolen, and the baby is thrown off a bridge. And the audio of what they did is the most cinematic thing I've ever experienced with Jim Gordon, and I love Gary Oldman. I love Jeffrey Wright. This delivery from Year One gave me a completely new context to a comic that I had memorized. Like, I could tell you what frames are where, and like I can play it in my head, but this radio experience, this audio experience is so cinematic. It added depth even to characters and books I know and love like the back of my hand. So I'm so honored to be a part of it because it is another layer. It's another medium for comic books in such a special way.
And if you can believe it, there is one level more of like fully integration, and that's if you grab the actual comic and read along with it, which I
Dude,
actually
love
did.
doing that.
Which I did a couple of days ago. My buddy Drew, he's in the process of moving, so I've been getting all this dope shit. He's got like just as much dope shit, a bunch of comics like I do, and he found a copy of like the original Batman Year One graphic novel from like the 80s, like the first edition printing. He gave it to me, and I was like, oh, I know exactly what I'm doing. Fired up DC High Volume Batman. I think I skipped ahead a little bit because I was like, let me see just how faithful this adaptation is. Like you said, word for freaking word. Now, and what I love too is that in some instances where maybe there isn't anything being said or no verbal or any dialogue happening, there is a little bit of a verbal cue to let you know, like, hey, Batman is putting on his gloves right now. And I do find that really impressive. So it's like you can enjoy the podcast without having the comic by your side, especially if you're familiar with it. I think like that's really the way to go. But reading it alongside, you're right, it's just something about just how freaking nice the sound production is on that podcast. So and you guys have went from you guys have adapted a lot more stories than I thought. You started with Batman Year One, That was a multi-part series. You guys completed Long Halloween. Now you're in Dark Victory. Is there, I guess, what is the, was that roadmap conscious? Do you know?
Yeah, the those three were all made to like with the intent of together. We weren't made at the same time, but like that
Okay,
was a
got
map
it.
of like a journey of that arc. Because I consider those three a 3-act structure almost. Like they tie together beautifully. I can't say what's next, but I can tell you what's next is another beautiful journey that ties together in much the same way. Like if you want to phase one that, phase two is just as elaborate. And that is
Cool.
so exciting and fun. And there's so much really cool stuff coming. And I got to help with some of the processes of a certain actor coming on board that I'm really excited about. And I'm really excited for this. Like I'm now part of the team, so I get to like know what's coming, and this is the most excited I've been for a certain person's take on a character now that I know where
Dope.
they're going. So I listen to it in 3 different ways. So depending on the issue, I like to sit in silence and like throw on headphones and have like the spatial chaos. Sometimes
Yeah.
I like to drive and listen to it because it gets me like time to pass and I'm like feeling like Batman driving through
Yeah.
LA. And then I'm also a big, we were talking right before air, but I'm a huge vinyl guy. Like I'm a big high fidelity guy. I have 4.5 foot standing Kef speakers.
Mm,
I'm like one of
good stuff.
those. Yeah, I'm like they're preposterous. They're like the Lamborghini of speakers. And so when it's a big climactic issue, I'll sit in front of them like the Maxwell cassette ad and just be like taken by Dark Victory or like
Oh
a
my
certain
God, yo,
moment.
real quick, plus 10 points for referencing one of my favorite fucking ads in the world. That Maxwell ad, the graphic is like, yo, it's like that is how I experience music in my home. You know, like
That's how I
I feel
listened to Long Halloween, dude, when it came together. You know
damn.
the scene of like the orchestra merging? I just
Hmm.
listened like in front of my speakers like cinema. It was amazing.
Yeah, and I guess to go back to what you were saying about just DC firing what feels like on all cylinders, especially the tech side, the social media, the digital offering. Like DC High Volume comes on top of all of these other really great audio drama DC podcasts, right? Like I think Batman Unburied. I think there was a Harley Quinn one. Obviously, Marvel had a couple of really dope ones too, like a Wolverine audio drama. So it's cool to see comic books. Like it is such a visual medium that I think sometimes you don't. I think fans might not appreciate or even foresee like the audio potential. And something like DC High Volume, I think, really shows you just how well-rounded comic books are, how they can be adapted into a live action show or a big budget movie or a really, well-produced audio drama or audio book, etc. I think that's what piques my interest a lot for DC High Volume, is just that it is a different way of approaching these stories, at least for me, for us, these stories that we've read probably hundreds of times, but experiencing it this way, you learn to appreciate it in a different way. And something you just said about like, this is what David Mazzucchelli's style would sound like. I'm still like chewing on that thought.
And I want to give some flowers to 3 people over at DC High Volume. There are 2 guys that I work with at both DC High Volume and DC Studio Showcase that know so much about comics that if I mispronounce a name or reference an issue, I'm like, it'll be like, well, that was the right issue, but it's because they appeared in the last panel. They'll know, be like, most people would think it's the next issue. Like these guys are so tuned in, and they're also responsible for the audio stuff. So Mike Pilata and Victor Diaz, these 2 dudes are encyclopedias in a way that I don't feel like I have to lean on them, but I feel like if there was a net, they are the net. Like if I'm falling, they got me, and I love the dudes for it. Like I had such a hard time saying Frank Quietly because I know it's Quietly, but it looks like Quietly. And like
For
Mike
sure.
would just
And I
come in
still
and be
say that.
like, Quietly, and I'm like, I know, but like those are the guys that get all this audio stuff done. Like they did Batman Unburied. Like I just want to give them their love. And then this guy Roshan, he is responsible for the sheer audacity of making this sound so professional. Like he's the guy that's making sure every level, like there are great directors working on this, there are great producers, script writers. This dude Roshan is like this master equalizer running things, and I'm just
That's
so
cool.
impressed with the team. And that's again why I think DC is where they are, is everyone I've worked with is just the top of their game.
Yeah, the top of the game, and it sounds like very passionate. I think that's coming through in a lot of the work. So, all right, and real quick, your role, aside, it sounds like from consultant, being involved with some of the behind the scenes stuff, but also, I guess, forward facing as it comes before an audio podcast. But in the same feed for DC High Volume, sometimes they'll inject like interviews that you host where you're talking to the cast, the voice actors, the production team, but also you'll sprinkle in interviews with like comic royalty. I think you had like Jeff Loeb
Yeah,
on
dude.
which I'm like, yo, that's like, one of those white whale interviews. I was listening to your interview with Mark, what's his name, Chiarello, so the DC Comics art director and editor of Batman: Dark Victory. And I guess I gotta say, what's it like for you to like see these two worlds of audio and visual storytelling like come together and be in the middle of like curating these conversations between like these players of both these worlds?
It's surreal because I also, in addition to all the jobs you so lovingly expressed at the top of this, I also host 4 or 5 major cons a year and run a lot of their panels. So I had worked with Jeff Loeb on panels with like Arthur Adams. I'd hosted his panels
Oh,
at like New
word.
York Comic Con. So I had met these guys in very specific settings where it was just about like, this property is going to be 50% of the interview. The other 50% can be like, me geeking out over their history. What this show allows is like the deepest deep dive into like one singular story, which is what I want to do. Like I'm a James Lipton guy. I want to go like crazy minutia into the thing. So with Jeff Loeb, for example, it's insane to get to talk so deeply about what The Long Halloween was inspired by and which, people inspired this, and to hear all this lore, and then to talk to Chiarello, who's from an era that I've only conceived of, like art direction in the 70s and 80s DC. My brain is like, how is this? It's so historic and it's so like holy that it's so weird to talk to someone that had anything to do with it. So like Jeff Loeb is already like a deity of comics, but it's like, that came out in a time frame that seems realistic. Whereas like art director for, Neil Adams, you're like, how did you talk to, it's just
Yeah.
so, it's an honor. And they're both bigger nerds than I expected. Like I know a lot of people, when you work in something for too long, you lose the passion. Like I have to read comics for fun every couple months. I have to read something that's like Bendis's Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 1. I have to just read it just for me so I can remember why I do the 50 comics that are work. And I'm always afraid I'll lose that. Oh, I still love this. And these guys are 50-year veterans. I was so afraid that I wouldn't see that spark and I'd be disenfranchised because I want to geek out, and they'll be like, it was a day at the office. There was never a day at the office moment with any of these dudes. And it was so cool to hear about like, running into Mike Mignola in a hallway and like the stories of that, and then be like, oh, I did Mike Mignola's Hellboy panel, and like we got to catch up on stories, and it was just geeking out, and some of it is filmed, and that's the coolest job you can hope for.
Still on the topic of DC High Volume, I want to know, has the series changed the way that you view the character Batman or the mythos of Batman? Like, do you appreciate it in a different way, having the experience of like getting to interview some of the creators, but then also like, revisiting the stories? Like, how has working on DC High Volume changed your relationship with that?
There was a moment where I was talking to Batman, and I wasn't talking to the actor. And it was a really interesting moment because I have certain Batman in my mind that I can see, but I can't see this audio Batman. It's only how I perceive him. And since it's not a drawing and it's not an actor, it's this really cool piece of raw imagination. And the epiphany I had, thanks to DC High Volume, is of course there's a Batman voice. Of course there's a Bruce Wayne voice. And of course there's a voice that Bruce Wayne would have in his head, and that those are 3 voices. I've always had that idea. I've always thought it was cool that there's probably a different voice in Bruce Wayne's head than the 2 facades he has. What I didn't consider is that he would have to develop that voice and normalize it. So when you're finding your Batman voice, as an actor, you're finding it, but also as a character that you're putting on to intimidate, you're finding it. So how do you hear yourself? And through year 1, I was like, oh, this is like Bruce Wayne navigating this fluctuation of tone. This is the actor finding it. And that was such a concept I never considered, because we see how many origins of Batman. I'm so sick of pearls, but I've never seen, like the psychology you can almost see in the mind.
Pearls again, come
No
on.
more pearls.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
have you ever seen in the mind of Bruce Wayne? Like,
Sure.
I think the closest we got isn't in a very good movie, but it's in a very interesting movie. I think Batman Forever and what Val Kilmer was doing was such an interesting look at psychology. I think Michael Keaton definitely knew that he's an unhinged, broken billionaire. I think that George Clooney was like, I'm making a McDonald's commercial. Val Kilmer was in this beautiful sweet spot, and I think some of the most interesting psychology of Batman visually is in some of those alone Val Kilmer moments. And I feel like DC High Volume gave me that kind of visual where I could see like a giant 8-foot bat, like that psychology is so visual when it's in your own imagination. And I've really enjoyed like hearing a score and being like, of course that's what Catwoman sounds like. Or like the Joker coming in and you're like, that's the energy entering a room and it's all up here. So I think I have a different appreciation for Batman because I've always considered, and this is my own headcanon, DC not signing off on this. I've always considered Batman's villains to be the representation of the broken parts of his psyche that he's trying to fix. I don't see it as like, he's in a room and everyone's dead, Sixth Sense. Like, I'm not saying their imagination, but I am saying, like, Harvey Dent, to me, represents what if Bruce Wayne used his money to get into politics and thought he could do the right thing. Joker, to me, is the obvious what if he had no rule. But then there's things like Mr. Freeze. I see Nora as the same passionate love Bruce Wayne has for Gotham. So his fighting Mr. Freeze is him struggling to accept that he's fighting this thing he can never get back, like Nora and his Gotham. And that's how I see the characters. So when I hear like an orchestra suite and what Sam brought to those suites, I get to go like, that's the sound of my weird headcanon. And I can't get that from a comic because it's so audio based.
Yeah, I've always, I mean, you're talking to a 13, 14-year podcaster, so I'm very biased when I say that. But I think the power of podcasting, it is such a intimate medium where you are literally asking people to stick their, your voice in their head. Like these headphones. I'm speaking, to our listeners right now, directly into their head. And when you think of something like a well-produced show, like a high volume, it is like, it does. I don't know. It's a different interaction. It's like, it just stimulates your brain in a different way with these characters. And to your point, not only are they in your head, but they do force you to view them in a different way. And maybe like how sometimes it might, enhance what you thought of this concept of this character or give you a different perspective. So yeah, I'm hearing you say all of that. Yeah.
DC High Volume is like the sister to comic books between the panels for me. So when I read a comic book, what I love is that the space between the panels, I'm not just the writer, I'm not just the director, I'm not just the actor. I am all of those things cinematically appear. That space between the panels is mine. What I love about High Volume is it is that energy, but with someone guiding me. So I get the same imagination, the same up here, but there's a bit of a frame around it. So I don't think it's better or worse. I think it's a companion. And that's what I think is so beautiful about either reading it or not reading it, about listening in the car or listening in headphones. Like, it's a really special medium.
Well said. Coy, if there was an opportunity to adapt another, famous DC comic story and give it the high volume treatment, what else comes to mind for you? I got a few myself. I want to hear from you first.
I would love to hear what the Kent Farm sounds like in Superman for All Seasons.
Yes.
That euphoria, that swelling of emotion, that sheer energy. So that's got to be up there. I would love to hear Hush, because I would love to hear like the bombastic aggression of all those villains like coming at you. Long Halloween is something similar, but I feel like as Batman evolves, his villains get more angry, and like that would be so intense. I would love to hear Mr. Miracle adapted in any way possible. Mr. Miracle is my favorite DC comic of all time. I think it is such an interesting way to modernize the New Gods. The fact that you've got a guy in LA struggling with existential crises, and you've got like Big Barda, but you've also got Grain of Goodness. Like, that book is crazy. So anyway, I can digest it. Like, yeah, like Darkseid is, I want to hear, right? Like, what is that ominous absence of sound after that period drops? So that would be up there. I think the one I want adapted into film most is Animal Man, but I don't know if Animal Man would work.
You beat. All right, so Animal Man was the top of my pick for an audio drama because it's like, okay, if we're talking about focusing on sound production and audio, it's like Animal Man, like the opportunity there to adapt so many different animal sounds and play into like that, the nature aspect, the what do they call it? Like Swamp Thing's got the green and Animal Man's got the, what is it, the red or something like that? So yeah, Animal Man was top of my list. I think Kingdom Come, same reason for which you brought up for Hush, just that like that big cinematic feel to it. I would love to see, like how you're saying, like a David Mazzucchelli. What does his art sound like? I'd be very curious to see what is an Alex Ross interpretation through audio, right?
A lot of strings.
Yeah, a lot of strings, a lot of horns. And I think if I had to pick a Batman one, Batman Arkham Asylum, because I think you could do.
Yeah, dude.
You could really lean into like the horror kind of elements to it.
Into all of those, co-signed. And then at the end of the first volume of Anime Man, Grant Morrison knocks on your door.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's crazy. All right, Coy. I got maybe two more questions for you, but you mentioned wanting having to take moments where you're like, hey, I need to go back, read comics, be reminded, fun comics, be reminded why I love this thing. And among my research, I found your Letterboxd, and it says that your favorite films are Fight Club, Matrix, Bruges. Is that how you say it? In
Bruges.
Bruges. Thank you. And then Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. I want to know for you, good sir, since that's 4 slots. On the comic book side, if you had to make a Mount Rushmore of your favorite comic books, what would be on that list?
I'm gonna go with the Ultimate Spider-Man I mentioned earlier because I think that is the most approachable and beautiful reintroduction of one of the most iconic characters of all time. I'm gonna go. Oh man, I'm gonna go Mr. Miracle, the Tom King, Mr. Odd's run. It really just blew my mind that could exist. I'm gonna do Volume 1 of Saga or Omnibus 1 of Saga if I'm allowed to go. Like, that first Omnibus of Saga changed how I see the medium of comic books. Like, it is so eye-opening. You can introduce a character in one panel and then kill him in the next. You're like, my best friend! Like, it's crazy what that comic accomplished. Like, it is so intense.
Stupid. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's nuts.
Really quick on that topic, you brought up like the golden age of comics. I generally feel that when Saga came out, it was around the time, like it was Image Comics, I think, like second renaissance. Saga, Deadly Class, a couple other, Black Science, right? The Rick Remender joint. Yeah, thank you, Deadly Class. Like Saga,
yeah, Black
to me,
Science was around then. Yeah,
Saga to me encapsulates like this period of comic books, and for Image especially. So great choice. Yeah, it'd be on the Mount Rushmore for sure. And then what's your 4th slot?
Yeah, I was trying to go a different publisher for each to stick with my, like, I'm a man of all publishers because I really think that's important. I think 4th, you know what? Let's go Department of Truth.
Ooh, nice.
I want to go because those are all pretty light. Actually, they get darker, right? Like Ultimate Spider-Man,
okay.
Mr. Miracle. Those are all they get darker. But Department of Truth is a comic that The Matrix is one of my 4 favorite movies, and it changed my sense of reality. Department of Truth is so good. I've had anxiety attacks reading it. I've literally had that moment when, like, I don't know if the listeners have had anxiety attacks, but like there's this like palm sweaty look around, like I don't like how I feel. And Department of Truth, I've been like, yo, but what if I believed in something enough it became true right now? Like I've had that. Enough people believe in Sasquatch, he could walk by. What if I'm the tipping point? Like it changed my psychology of belief because we have seen in science that there are cells that act differently when observed. We've seen that like mass hysteria can be over nothing that actually happened. And media is changing how we perceive our reality in real time. Department of Truth feels like the next logical step of that. Like, what if there's this conspiratorial group that is in control of controlling how we think so it doesn't become real? And that really messed me up. So it's not like, I think an easy answer would have been a Batman Hush or Year One or these comics that I love. But I really wanted to go 4 different tones, and I think Ultimate Spider-Man for its approachability and its joy, and Spider-Man's my guy. I think I'm going to go, Mr. Miracle to show DC's strength of being grounded and also balloons. I don't know what just happened. Look at that! Look at Department of Truth happening just now!
Oh my God.
That's what I'm saying.
Are you recording using iPhone or something? Yeah, that's it.
I'm on my computer. It just happened.
Okay, that was great.
But yeah, all 4 are such different things, and an honorable 5th mention would be The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly with Deadpool. It's a Deadpool story with Wolverine and Captain America where they go to North Korea and they discover basically evil where people are using the healing factor of Wolverine and Deadpool to do horrible things to these people in a concentration camp. And
man,
dude, it's the heart of Deadpool that no one talks about with all the comedy from a broken place. That's my honorable mention 5th.
That was a one hell of a honorable mention. I've seen this cover so many times, and I mean I'm looking at the lineup. I was like, how have I not read this? You got Posehn, Gary Duggan, I think Scott Koblish, that's the name, and then Declan Shelby doing art. Come, all right,
gotta read that, man. 6 issues.
That's on top. Hearing you talk about Department of Truth, I'm like, you know what? Coy, I'm just going to take your word for it because I remember when Department of Truth dropped. I want to say Department of Truth dropped the same month give or take 1 or 2 months or a couple weeks, when like the lockdowns happened, and it was just too much for me. I think I read issue 1.
It's
I'm
a
like, nope,
lot.
not right now, buddy. So I'm
I
gonna have to go
almost
back
went
and revisit
Something is
that.
Killing the Children to hit boom up instead of Image. So Something is Killing
Sure,
the
sure,
Children is like right there to close 6. Doing 4 is hard. A 20 would be hard, but 4 was
for
impossible. But
sure,
yeah,
for sure.
I really want to know what you think of Good, Bad, and the Ugly, man.
No, I'm gonna check that out. That was a fantastic list, Coy. One last question for you, Coy, before we wrap up. What piece of it? All right. What piece of advice would you give to someone that is listening, that is in this, space? Whether they're a journalist, a podcaster, etc. That maybe you would give to a younger version of you. Knowing all that you know now, if you could go back in time and give advice to a young Coy who was trying to break in, that might have made his life easier, what would you say to him?
If you're not willing to do it for free, you don't love it as much as you think you do. But once you start getting paid, never, ever undervalue yourself again. So do it for free. Be willing to do it for free. Love it so much that you can do it for free. But hold that in here and then make sure that if people can get away with not paying you, they will. So make sure that you stand up for yourself and know your value. So give yourself value, build up your value, do it for 10 years if it takes it. Like I mean, I've been doing this since my first solo show. Like I had my own show that didn't pay very well, so I had to have a day job and 2 other jobs. But I was doing this since the first images of Falcon came out for Winter Soldier professionally. And that was like 15 years ago. So it's a journey. But I always built value. So you need to be willing to do it for free to build that value, to build those connections, to build your skill, to build all of the things. But once you're at a tipping point, keep doing it for free, keep building value, but know your worth so that way someone doesn't take advantage of you, because that will also happen. So you need to have those two sides. Like you need to have the devil and the angel on your shoulders at all time. The angel that's willing to do it for free and the devil that goes like, yeah, but we got to eat because you'll burn out and like, you got to
No.
pay rent. And once you're at the point where you can stand up for that, like I'll do jobs for free still, but I don't think that I should want that anymore, but I also want to be the guy that's willing to. Like that hunger has to be in there. So that balance is the trick.
That was a fantastic piece of advice. And I think with that being said, ladies and gents, this is the Short Box Podcast. And we just finished. Let me do it again. And with that being said, ladies and gents, this is the Short Box Podcast. And we just finished talking to Coy Jandreau about his role all over the place. All right. He's on DC Studios Showcase. He is on DC High Volume Batman. And obviously, he's a great follow on Instagram if you love finding new comic books. I will have links to all of this stuff, all right, in the show notes. You can check it out from there. Coy, do you have any parting words, any shameless plug before we wrap up?
Hunt down my YouTube. I do long form stuff there. So the comics that we talked about on my Instagram, where there's that 9 or 10 like pulls, I do a breakdown on a live stream every week of those books. So the same way I just broke them down here, you can get a video of that. So if you want to bring it to your comic store and go like these ones, a little definition of like why I love them, and that way you know if it's for you. So I do a live stream every week where I talk about all the biggest movie news and comic news, but it's from the comic book lens. So all those Spider-Man images that came out, I reference like Buscema and like certain artists that would be referenced in that like paparazzi photo in Galway. So I'm trying to bring the nerddom into the mainstream, but use the big news to bring people into the page. So hunt me down on YouTube. I do movie reviews, TV reviews, lots of comic stuff, but it is a very comic centric page, as well as like I just put out my One Battle After Another review today. Like there's lots of everything. You can also hunt me down on Real Rejects and both of these DC shows that I love. And I want to plug one comic before I leave. You guys get the exclusive my favorite comic of this week. Before I drop it, I loved Quick Stop Volume 3, Number 2. Kevin Smith wrote one of the most heartfelt pieces of anything I've ever seen Kevin write, and that man is pure heart. So saying that, I could not, that couldn't be higher praise. That man is all heart. He wrote a comic that is a love letter to Shannon Doherty, and the first half of the comic is a true story of Kevin and Shannon Doherty from 95, and then the second half of the comic is the first scene of what would have been her scene in Twilight of the Mallrats. So we lost Shannon Doherty last year. Mallrats is why I got into this business. Mallrats and Kevin Smith are the reason that I do any of this that I do. I never thought we'd know, the role Shannon would have had. It's a really beautiful comic. It's really beautiful to see Kevin use the medium of comics to tell a story that would never be able to be told otherwise. And it's a peek into how much of a pure heart man Kevin is, and it references Animal Man in the comic. So check out Quick Stop Volume 3, Issue 2 from Dark Horse Comics. That's my favorite comic of this week. Just came out yesterday. It's gonna be hard to find, so hunt it down ASAP.
There we go. A man of the people, Coy. You've been fantastic. This is definitely a runner-up for one of my favorite conversations this year. And I hope to have you back some other time to chop it about comics, man. You've been great. Thank you.
Dude, absolute pleasure. And now that we've met 100%, getting this organized and scheduled was a whole thing, but now that we actually know each other, I'm down, man.
Yeah, hell yeah.